down to a sound and then being like, well, now I have to go back in, rebuild that sound. So it can be really effective. And also from a consistency standpoint, sometimes it'll help you alleviate some anomalies that otherwise, would come from the rest of a signal chain, whether it's noise or just like, hey, this amp's great, but it's got some really weird, like low mid rumble to it that I always have to pull out. A lot of engineers will know that about their amps. I know exactly what I like and don't like about my Jubilee, and there's very little I don't like about it, but I do know what I usually have to do to get it to sit in a more modern lane sometimes, and where I have to carve. So with that said, a lot of my productions are a different ratio, right? So some of the, like if I need for example, if I need a foundational rhythm track element, right? I'll capture that and I'll pull out like if it's a modern thing, like something like a 5150 or, like some sort of Freeman or like Marshall adjacent thing that, that has a lot of bite. And then I will know that, and I track DIs on the way in, guitar, bass, everything, obviously. I think that's good practice. Just as an oh shit,
just in case.
Just in case, but again,
your commitment plus just in case,
right? Of course.
The backup hard drive,
because why not? I had a hard drive go down on me last week. Why not? So then I tend to look at, well, from a shaping standpoint with the track, the quad stacks or rhythm stacks that I'm doing. Maybe I don't want the exact same amp, but maybe in the sake of time, it doesn't make sense for me to get another whole setup, shape out and move. And, because time is money and some bands just don't have time to sit around putting up a whole rig. And it's easier to keep the track up and keep the energy flowing when you're in the mindset to just track the same part and double it, right? So I try to do that, but then I can always go back and say, great, I have the DIs of that. Now let me find a sound that's similar but fills in the gaps and acts as that little supplemental glue and stays a little bit more consistent. So that's what I find sometimes a lot of the amp sim stuff can be helpful for. And also for bass, it's a quick shift. You can add some quick grit and a lot of those things that maybe you're like, hey, I didn't want to go too far with it, but now that I hear the whole track, I'm like, I really can really open this up. And I think it's great for that. But there's no substitute for the vibe that like the nicest, the best real amp can give you, but also like, it's going to come down to the song and how you're treating things and blending things, in a whole anyway. So it's the sum of all parts really. And that's also where kind of my, my core thought comes down to is like, it doesn't matter whether they're real guitars or fake guitars if the song is just bad, right? Or there are way other larger glaring issues with the production,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love that because it's like cool. If it's going to help me, I'm going to use the Sims. If it's not, if I have, this at my, disposal, great, we'll use an amp, like it's whatever and also production dependent. Like, what does the production actually need?
Totally.
So you're just fluid about it. So that's probably the healthiest approach, I think.
Yeah. It's done me okay so far, and I just try to not be too black and white about it. I think when it comes to that, yeah.
Nice. So getting back into your own kind of productions that you do with artists, do you do anything consistently on all these productions that you think would be like a trademark thing, like not like a trademark sound, but like a way of working with artists? Yeah.
Well, I mean, so kind of extending from where we just left it off of just being like, okay, the core unit of the song that you're working with, that's usually where, even if I'm not involved in the whole process from the start and someone's coming to me, later on for a mix or like post-production or just an additional ear, and what else can we kind of sprinkle on top, or how can we, take it the final sprint, that guide will always be, at least for me, what I've gotten better and better at and continually learning every day with every different scenario, is taking the core song, the bones of it being, the lyrics, the melody, the theme, and kind of the overall emotional quality or response that it's trying to elicit, and letting that be my guide to inform everything else, and making sure if I have a chance that is as strong and as rich and depth filled as it can be to inform the rest of a really great production and work. And if it's not, and if there are some weak points, how can we take care of those? How can we strengthen those to make them more convincing, more compelling, and in a way that is not necessarily a signature Casey Cavaliere thing, but is always me trying to help whoever I'm working with figure out what is a signature them thing, and pull it out. And a lot of the times, from a lyrical standpoint, that informs so much of, even from just like a sonic word painting kind of thing. I take, I think actually what we might get into a little bit later on the sauce, if you have something queued up, is a cool example of a project and an artist that I think reading into more than just the surface of the lyrics, but understanding the attitude and, the very specific energy of it, and how that informs maybe bringing things that aren't even like necessarily instrumental, maybe it's more about developing a world that feels unique, but also feels like it's in conversation with the lyrics and are an extension of that. So it's like you're almost building out, things that in another realm would be visual components, and or little Easter eggs, but doing it in just the sonic sense. So sometimes that's saying
soundscaping.
Yeah, and not every project requires that kind of stuff. Sometimes it's just some subtle embellishment and layering to emphasize impact and transitions. But sometimes it's like, hey, this lyric, I love it, but I need the attitude to follow, and asking yourself a series of questions of like, is that really how you'd say that? If you're quoting yourself in that scenario. And for me, that's, kind of a signature of like, if something is coming from me, I want it to have a really cohesive song as a whole. Even if it's something that's not, stylistically for everybody or whatever, I at least hope someone would be able to look at a production and say, well, this is not my genre, but it's convincing and I get what they were doing. And I see how that came together and is cohesive in that way.
Yeah, it's like the conviction to the...
Yeah. So I'd like, if anything that, that's not like this is his signature guitar sound or this is his signature. It's like, because I know some guys love to niche down and love to be known for like, I am the pop punk guy, or I am the vocal, like female indie pop guy. Right. I don't necessarily want to do that to myself, because that's just not how I look at and consume music, quite frankly. Because I think I learned... Me
neither, by the way.
Yeah, and I think that's okay. Yeah. And, maybe some people, some business coaches might say I'm shooting myself in the foot because, I'll never get a leg up or whatever. It's like, that hasn't been a problem. I've actually think I'm potentially more valuable to the artists that I work with because of it, because I can pull things from other genres and ideas that that they maybe normally wouldn't see, and repurpose and reframe things, and it also allows me the objectivity to treat each project and artist as its own thing, instead of them coming to me and saying, we want to sound exactly like this last record that you did. I don't want that in 10, 20 years. I want you to come here and say, we want to make a record that sounds like nothing you've ever done, and we think you're the person that might be open to that journey. And I would say
it's so liberating. Also, I feel like when you're trying to do something that's like something else, there's a lot of pressure to make it sound exactly like that. And if it's not, then you really can I'm shit at this, And if you're making something new, there's no limit to what it could be and what it needs to sound like. I don't know. I look at like Billie Eilish as like the, epitome of that today in like 2021, where like she and her brother are just literally making whatever they want. And, I think Phineas, her brother, said, like, yeah, I basically will try to do one thing and copy it, and then I won't quite do it perfectly, and it'll just be my own thing. And it's like, great. Like, you didn't have to get to that. But as long as you kind of did your thing and it works for that music, it's great. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't need to be, I feel like people work so hard to kind of like reach this ideal of what something should sound like or can sound like, when like in reality, if you just kind of, this is something I talk a lot about on this podcast with various guests. It's just doubling down on who you are and what you do best, and And so if you're a producer, it's like doubling down on whatever this artist is doing best and like making them just sound like them, you know?
Yeah. I mean, and that's what I like, because I think someone that's coming to you and looking for that artist producer, artist engineer, artist mixer, mastering, whoever it is, they're looking for ultimately your taste, but maybe it's taste in that genre. But ultimately, I'd like to think that it's your taste in, energy and emotion. And then there's some things that are a little bit less tangible and a little bit less definite. And
I love that.
And
yeah,
you know what I mean? And I think,
so.
trusting you to be like, hey, here's this song. It sits in this kind of world. Now you're trusting me to take an objective, unbiased opinion towards what I think hits me and doesn't hit me about it, outside of genre, outside of whatever. And yes, there are certain tropes that it's like, if that's important to the artist to sound that way, of course, then, there's a given. It's like, you want this kind of drum sound. You want these kind of really big forward guitars. Whatever you want, this kind of huge, lush, ambient vocal style, right? Those are things that, of course, are picked from the influences that make up that artist's DNA. But ultimately, every song they write is also going to be different. So kind of letting the song be the guide is really what I would say myself as a producer and just general, person that works in service and in conjunction with other artists and creatives is my biggest probably my biggest point, is just to let the song, I would double down on that if we're doubling down, let the song, be the guide and figure it out. And if it's not hitting you, ask the questions, ask why, ask what you can do to make it hit harder. And you ultimately, as a producer, engineer, whatever you're doing, whichever space you fill as an artist, a songwriter, and even in other creative fields, right? If we're talking about photography, videography, illustration, graphic design, they're the same questions. Why is it not hitting? Why is it not working? I know why. I know my intent for writing this part was. I pictured it doing this to me, and making me feel this way. But when I hear it back now, it's not. Why? And then those are the tools, that as you go, you expand the toolbox of things that you can reach for to answer those questions, or try to plug in. But the answer will never always be exactly the same, because the songs, the origin, and all the variables will never be the same. So teaching yourself, and kind of developing the systems to ask those things, I think that's what makes someone that works with in the music production world very valuable. So
yeah, I love that, man. Let's get a little technical. Like you do some mixing, right?
Yeah, I like to try, You like
to try, yeah.
As they all say. I mean, I think even the best mixers would have those projects where there's just like, man, am I even good at this right now?
Totally. There are days where we feel like we're top of the world, and there's days where we feel like utter garbage.
Right.
Well, talk me through your approach to mixing. Like, how templated are you? How freeform are you? Out of the box, in the box? Any methods, tried and true techniques, whatever you feel like sharing.
No, for sure. Well, I mean, kind of like I said, I see a lot of people that have made really great workflows and careers out of heavily templated systems. I have dabbled with those and experimented with certain things. I think I've come to a place now, and again, the process is always evolving for sure. I think for anybody, I think anybody that's pulling up a brand new mix in a project and isn't at least like auditioning like one new plugin or saying, hey, there's this thing that I was talking about with another buddy of mine, a couple weeks ago, and he does this thing, and I'm just like, it seems so weird. This seems like a good opportunity to try that, and building that into the time to be creative. I think you're missing out, and you're going to be dead in the water, because it's going to end up being really stale and stagnant. And I think music is moving so friggin' fast with technology that it's truly hard to keep up with like what's new and different techniques and ideas. So I think that as it goes is like no template can really hold all of that. But if there is a template, I think I would say one that allows for that And for that really organic expansion is the only one that I haven't found one yet. So I tend to pull pieces of like, hey, I love this drum look. I like this routing. Sure, I'll use it from a, from a time saving standpoint to know that I'm going to sum everything through here. And then this is how I'm going to separate the vocals and the rest of the music. And